Soil can be heavier than steel when it carries the weight of a nation's dream. In Burkina Faso, more than 60% of people live in rural areas where a road is not just a strip of ground, but a lifeline. Without it, farmers remain trapped in isolation. Children walk miles through dust to reach school, patients wait for hours before reaching a hospital, and soldiers struggle to defend villages under threat. A simple path can decide whether hope survives or vanishes. Into this harsh reality steps a surprising vision. 1,000 kilometers of rural roads, not carved by bulldozers or poured in asphalt, but shaped by calloused hands using soil packed into humble bags. This method, called Do Nou, may appear modest, yet in the hands of a determined people and a leader who dares to dream, it becomes more than a technique. It becomes a statement. Dignity is not bought, sovereignty is not donated, and Africa's future will not be paved by foreign aid, but by its own hands. Stay with us. What follows is more than a headline. It is a turning point written in red soil. Subscribe now and walk with this story. The story of Burkina Faso's road revolution begins not with steel bridges or towering cranes, but with bags of soil pressed firmly by the hands of villagers. For decades, this landlocked nation has lived under the weight of geography and poverty. With scarce access to international ports, limited industrial capacity, and a national budget stretched thin, the idea of building thousands of kilometers of modern roads seemed more like a dream than a plan. Yet dreams are often born from necessity. The Do Nou method, first devised in Japan, found new meaning in West Africa. Do means soil. Nou means bag. It is a technique so simple that its power lies precisely in its accessibility. Laterite soil, the iron-rich red earth that stains the hands and feet of millions of Burkinabe, becomes the raw material. Workers shovel it into strong polypropylene sacks. Each sack is then tamped exactly 20 times with a wooden or metal rod, ensuring the earth inside is tightly packed. What emerges is not a fragile bag, but a brick-like block, ready to be stacked into rows that will form the backbone of a road. Once arranged side by side, the bags create a solid base, which is then covered with another layer of soil or gravel. With careful moisture control, just enough water to bind the particles, the structure achieves surprising durability. The process requires no bulldozers, no concrete mixers, no fuel-hungry rollers. All it needs is human energy, basic hand tools, and the patience of rhythm. Strike, compact, repeat. What appears humble is in fact revolutionary because it translates scarcity into possibility. In Burkina Faso, over 60% of the population lives in rural zones. Agriculture is the heartbeat of the economy, and yet the veins that should carry crops to market have long been blocked. Without proper roads, sacks of maize rot before reaching buyers, cattle die before arriving at abattoirs, and mothers deliver babies at home because hospitals remain too far. The absence of infrastructure is not just an inconvenience. It is a sentence of poverty, disease, and despair. It is here that President Ibrahim Traoré announced a target that startled many: the construction of 1,000 kilometers of rural roads. Critics scoffed. How could a nation battling terrorism, limited finances, and weak industry embark on such an ambitious path? But Traoré's vision did not rely on imported machines or expensive contractors. It leaned on the strength of ordinary people, harnessing the collective power of thousands of calloused hands. The beauty of Do Nou lies not only in its cost-effectiveness, but also in its social dimension. Unemployed youth, who often face disillusionment and are vulnerable to extremist recruitment, suddenly find themselves with purpose. They earn an income while literally laying down the foundation of their own future. Villagers do not wait for foreign companies that may arrive late, inflate budgets, or leave unfinished work. Instead, they become both builders and beneficiaries. Ownership grows, pride multiplies. When you compact the soil for your own village road, you walk upon it with dignity. This initiative echoes an older African truth. Development is strongest when it grows from within, like a seed sprouting in familiar soil. What Burkina Faso is attempting is not merely an engineering shortcut, but a political declaration. It says to the world, we may be poor in machines, but we are rich in resilience. We may lack concrete highways, but we will carve our sovereignty out of red earth itself. The goal of 1,000 kilometers may sound audacious, yet step by step, bag by bag, it is becoming tangible. Every completed section of road connects a farmer to a market, a child to a school, a patient to a doctor. Each meter built is not just infrastructure. It is a lifeline extended, a barrier broken. But this is only the beginning, for as inspiring as the vision is, the question remains, can simple bags of soil truly reshape the destiny of a nation? The announcement of 1,000 kilometers of roads did not echo in conference halls or glossy brochures. It was proclaimed in the dust of villages where the absence of roads had long been a silent curse. For the people of Burkina Faso, it was not just an infrastructure target, it was a promise that their isolation would end, that the map of their nation would finally connect the forgotten with the center. As the first projects began, the scale of participation shocked observers. Young men who once wandered aimlessly in towns, waiting for elusive jobs, picked up tamping rods. Women joined to carry water, organize meals, and sometimes compact the soil themselves. Elders supervised, recalling older traditions of communal labor, where whole villages gathered to build wells or repair granaries. The road projects became not merely construction sites, but theaters of solidarity, where identity was reforged. One scene stands as an emblem of this transformation. In a dusty rural district, dozens of young people lined up with rhythmic precision. Tamp, 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 20 times per bag. The sound became a drumbeat of renewal. With every strike, they declared, "We are building not just a road, but a future." For many, it was the first time they felt they owned a piece of national development, not as passive beneficiaries, but as active creators. The emotional crescendo reached its peak when villagers walked upon the first completed sections. Children, once forced to wade through mud during the rainy season, ran freely on the compacted red surface. Farmers transported maize and sorghum on bicycles without sinking into sand. A mother carrying a child exclaimed, "This is not a road. This is life returned to us." In such moments, the project transcended engineering. It became a collective rebirth. Reactions spread quickly beyond the villages. In Ouagadougou, commentators hailed the initiative as a pragmatic revolution. Radio hosts described it as development from the ground up. Community leaders praised the government for daring to decentralize responsibility, trusting citizens with the tools of progress. For once, development was not imported with strings attached. It was handcrafted with sweat and pride. Yet the enthusiasm was not confined to the capital. In provincial towns, people began asking, when will our district receive its Do Nou project? Expectations grew. The 1,000 kilometers no longer looked like a statistic. It became a movement. With every kilometer completed, demand multiplied. The project evolved from an experiment into a national wave. The emotional weight was intensified by Burkina Faso's fragile security context. For years, terrorism had ravaged rural communities, exploiting their sense of abandonment. When roads were built by villagers themselves, that sense began to erode. Youth, who might have been tempted by armed groups, now carried tools instead of rifles. As one local leader put it, a young man who builds a road in his own village is less likely to burn it down. Some foreign analysts framed the project as a desperate shortcut, questioning its durability. Others saw it as an ingenious adaptation to scarcity. But for the Burkinabe, the debate over asphalt versus soil mattered less than the tangible reality beneath their feet. A road they could walk, cycle, or drive upon today, not in some distant future. The crescendo of hope also carried a new rhythm of pride. For too long, development stories from Africa were written in the language of dependency, aid packages, donor conferences, or imported blueprints. But here was a narrative of agency, where sovereignty was measured not in speeches, but in sacks of soil. And yet, every vision faces its trial. The cheers of the villagers mask deeper questions. How sustainable will these roads be? How will maintenance be guaranteed when the euphoria fades? What happens when the rains return, or when the load of commerce grows heavier than the bags beneath the surface? The movement has ignited passion, but passion alone does not carry a nation for decades. The immediate effects of the Do Nou road projects can be felt in the dust that no longer clings to market goods and in the hours saved on a single journey. Farmers who once lost half their harvest to spoilage now transport vegetables and grain swiftly to buyers. Merchants reach deeper into villages, fueling local trade. Students, freed from exhausting treks through mud, arrive at school with energy to learn. Patients travel faster to hospitals, no longer gambling their lives on broken paths. Infrastructure has never been just about transport. It has always been about dignity. In the short term, these roads are a lifeline against poverty. They reduce the cost of moving goods, open access to markets, and increase the profitability of agriculture, the backbone of Burkina Faso's economy. The multiplication effect is clear. More trade means higher incomes. Higher incomes feed children, build homes, and fund education. A road is not a strip of land, but a circulatory system for prosperity. Politically, the impact runs deeper. For decades, many rural communities felt abandoned by distant governments in Ouagadougou. Broken promises and unfinished projects had bred mistrust. But Do Nou changes this equation. By mobilizing local youth and decentralizing responsibility, the state has begun to restore faith. When a villager sees his son tamping soil for a road that serves their own family, the abstract idea of government becomes tangible. Sovereignty is no longer a speech. It is a visible road that can be walked upon. This shift in perception is crucial in a nation plagued by insurgency. Extremist groups have thrived in areas where the state was absent. They exploited isolation, promising young men a purpose and a wage when no alternatives existed. But when those same young men are handed tools and paid to build roads, their allegiance shifts. Security is not only about soldiers and rifles, it is about presence, opportunity, and dignity. Roads built by the community reinforce the social contract between citizens and the state. In the medium term, the political dividends may be even greater. A functioning rural network fosters national cohesion. Villages that once lived in isolation now feel part of a broader story. Economic integration reduces the temptation to turn against the state. Trust, once broken, begins to mend. Development is no longer something delivered from above. It is co-created from below. And yet, the symbolism stretches even further. These 1,000 kilometers are more than engineering. They are a manifesto. They tell a continent weary of dependency that survival does not always lie in loans or imported models. They whisper that there is strength in simplicity, that a people armed with soil and willpower can break cycles of neglect. In this sense, the Do Nou experiment is not only Burkinabe, it belongs to a wider movement of anti-colonial Africa, where development is not dictated from outside, but grown from within. Still, questions remain. Will the enthusiasm outlast the first wave of projects? Can maintenance be guaranteed without slipping back into neglect? Roads, like trust, require continuous upkeep. Without a system of shared responsibility, the red surface may erode as quickly as the political goodwill it generated. Moreover, These roads are not designed for heavy trucks or industrial commerce. The balance between modest methods and modern demands must be carefully managed. For now, however, the sense of possibility outweighs the doubts. Each kilometer completed does more than reduce travel time. It reduces the psychological distance between state and citizen. In the dust of Burkina Faso, sovereignty is being repaved meter by meter. But no nation walks alone, and beyond Burkina Faso's borders, eyes are watching. How did the world react to this unorthodox revolution? When Burkina Faso first unveiled its plan to build 1,000 kilometers of roads by hand, international observers reacted with a mixture of surprise and skepticism. In the corridors of regional organizations such as ECOWAS and the African Union, the initiative was quietly discussed as both a symbol of resilience and a sign of desperation. Could a nation under constant security pressure with limited finances really transform its landscape with sacks of soil? European commentators tended to frame the experiment in technical terms, focusing on the durability of the Do Nou method. They argued that while useful for village paths, it could not replace asphalt highways necessary for heavy commerce. Reports from development agencies echoed this caution, calling the method a temporary solution to a permanent problem. Yet they could not ignore the enthusiasm visible in villages where people finally felt connected. The United States viewed the project through a different lens: security. Washington has long worried about instability in the Sahel, where terrorism exploits poverty and weak infrastructure. Analysts noted that community-built roads do more than move goods. They allow security forces to respond faster to threats, projecting state authority into remote areas. In a region where extremism thrives in isolation, connectivity itself becomes a weapon of defense. African voices, however, brought the most powerful interpretations. Leaders in neighboring states saw in Burkina Faso's model a challenge to the dominance of foreign contractors who often drain budgets with inflated costs. Civil society organizations praised the initiative as a reclamation of agency, proof that development need not always come with foreign aid conditions. Editorials across the continent framed it as part of a wider struggle for African sovereignty, a refusal to let external prescriptions define local futures. International media also highlighted the symbolic dimension. The image of youth tamping soil 20 times into a bag carried a resonance far beyond Burkina Faso. It looked like a metaphor for Africa itself, taking what is available, applying discipline, and building something solid from scarcity. Critics questioned whether the enthusiasm could last, but admirers saw in it a glimpse of a different development paradigm, one rooted in community, dignity, and ownership. What is certain is that the Do Nou project has unsettled the usual hierarchy of voices in global development debates. Instead of experts lecturing villagers are now lecturing the world by example. And if sovereignty can truly be built bag by bag, then Burkina Faso may have opened a path for others to follow. If the soil itself carries sovereignty, what future roads may rise across the continent? The Do Nou initiative stands today as both a symbol of triumph and a test of endurance. Its achievements are undeniable: jobs created, villages connected, confidence restored. Yet no honest vision can ignore the challenges ahead. Roads built from soil bags are not eternal. They cannot endure the weight of heavy trucks or the relentless erosion of storms without constant care. Sustainability will depend not on a single project, but on a culture of maintenance, where every community accepts responsibility for its section of road. The future may lie in a balanced model. For critical arteries of commerce, modern machinery and asphalt will remain necessary. But for the thousands of kilometers of rural paths that bind villages to each other, Do Nou provides an accessible alternative. Blending the two approaches, partial mechanization for major routes, community labor for secondary roads, creates a logical allocation of scarce resources. Instead of choosing between modernity and tradition, Burkina Faso can weave them together. The road ahead is not only physical, but generational. Training programs will be vital. If youth across the country learn the method, they will not only gain temporary employment, but also a transferable skill. In a nation where frustration too often fuels unrest, equipping young people with practical knowledge can transform potential despair into constructive energy. Every tamped bag becomes a lesson in discipline, cooperation, and shared destiny. Beyond infrastructure, the implications are profound. Each kilometer of road is also a kilometer of national unity. In a region scarred by insurgency, visible development sends a message stronger than speeches. The state has not abandoned you. When farmers reach markets, children arrive at schools, and soldiers can defend vulnerable communities more quickly, trust in the nation deepens. The road, in this sense, is both a literal and symbolic line of defense. Still, the greatest test will be time. Can the passion of today survive the fatigue of tomorrow? Will political will endure beyond the excitement of announcements? History shows that movements fade if they do not become institutions. Burkina Faso must therefore embed the Do Nou approach into its governance framework, ensuring it is not a passing campaign, but a long-term pillar of national development. And so the nation stands at a crossroads. One path leads back to dependency, waiting for contractors and donors to dictate its future. The other is harder, dustier, built bag by bag, but it is theirs. If Burkina Faso can walk this road with determination, the red soil may yet pave the way to dignity. But even this journey is not the final chapter, for if one landlocked nation can carve hope out of its soil, what vision awaits in the horizon of a continent still searching for its road to sovereignty? In the end, the story of Burkina Faso's 1,000 kilometers is not merely about roads. It is about a people rediscovering their agency in a world that often told them they were too poor, too weak, too dependent. Each tamped bag of soil carries more than earth. It carries defiance, dignity, and the conviction that destiny need not be outsourced. The lesson is clear. Development does not always come dressed in steel and concrete. Sometimes it comes in calloused hands, in rhythms of labor, in the laughter of children walking a new road to school. The Do Nou method may be modest in design, but its resonance is vast. It declares that sovereignty is not a gift. It is built 1 meter at a time by those who refuse to wait. For Burkina Faso, these roads are arteries of hope. They connect farmers to markets, patients to hospitals, and soldiers to vulnerable outposts. But they also connect the nation to a wider narrative, one where the soil itself becomes a weapon against dependency. In this sense, the project belongs to the larger struggle of anti-colonial Africa, where nations refuse to be defined by aid packages and foreign prescriptions. Instead, they embrace the stubborn belief that their future can be built from their own ground. The implications extend beyond Ouagadougou. Across the continent, leaders and citizens alike are watching. If a small, landlocked state can carve dignity out of red soil, what stops others from doing the same? Might this not be a blueprint for African sovereignty, where local solutions triumph over imported hierarchies? Could this be the dawn of a continental awakening, a chapter of resilience authored not in donor capitals, but in villages long ignored? The answer lies not only in government halls, but in communities themselves. Roads require maintenance, just as sovereignty requires vigilance. The dream of 1,000 kilometers is a milestone, not a finish line. The real journey is whether Burkina Faso, and indeed all of anti-colonial Africa, will continue walking this path with courage, creativity, and unity. So let us end with a question that belongs not only to one nation, but to a continent. If one country can rise from soil, what stops a whole people from building a new destiny? Do not look away. What comes next may change how we read Africa's map. Subscribe, share, and stand with the story of a road built from the ground up.